The story of my family is a tapestry of resistance. My father, Marcus Thompson, a dock worker in Oakland, and my mother, Diane, who cleaned houses in the most elegant neighborhoods of San Francisco, for decades taught me that value is not measured by skin color, but by the strength of spirit. I grew up in East Palo Alto, one of the poorest neighborhoods in California, where each achievement seemed like an act of rebellion. While my classmates dreamed of being actresses or models, I devoured programming books. My first computer, an old model my uncle got secondhand, was my passport to another world. College was a constant battle. In the engineering faculty, we were only 3 black women among more than 200 students. Faculty members looked at me as if my presence was an anomaly, but every dismissive glance transformed into fuel for my determination. My first interview at Tech Silicon Valley was a survival ritual. I felt every gaze scanning me, not just evaluating my skills, but my right to be there. I got the position, not out of pity, but through competence. My code was clean, my logic impeccable. 5 years later, I was systems coordinator, a position that represented not just my individual success, but a small breach in the system. The year-end party would be another test. My emerald green dress was not just clothing, but armor. Each fold of the fabric carried the history of generations of black women who preceded me. While I was doing my makeup, my younger sister, Rachel, "Watch me, you're going to crush it, sis," she said with a smile that always gave me strength. My phone vibrated. A message from David, my boss. "Lauren, we're expecting you at 8 p.m. Dress code, chic social." Alone in front of the mirror, I took a deep breath. I knew that tonight would be more than a simple corporate party. It would be a battlefield where my dignity would be put to the test. While adjusting my silver earring, a question resonated in my mind. How many barriers will I have to break through today to prove my worth? The Crown Plaza ballroom glittered with an opulence that felt completely foreign to me. Crystal chandeliers, tables covered with immaculate white tablecloths, and an atmosphere that screamed privilege in every corner. I, Lauren Thompson, felt that every step I took was being watched, analyzed, almost as if my presence was an intrusion in this corporate universe. David, my boss, greeted me with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Lauren, how elegant," he said, leaving a meaningful pause that I knew all too well. A pause that translated to, "You're different, but not quite how we expected." My emerald green dress stood in stark contrast to the gray and black suits around me. I was like a splash of color in a monochromatic composition. The men, mostly white, with bodies that revealed ours in private gyms, glanced at me sideways. The women, with their perfect hairstyles and discreetly ostentatious jewelry, made no effort to hide their discomfort. Around me, conversations about million-dollar projects, corporate trips, and investments flowed naturally. I, who had reached this position after years of relentless work, felt like an anthropologist studying a completely foreign culture. My champagne glass was my shield. Each sip was a declaration that I belonged here, though everything around me suggested otherwise. "Would you like to dance, Lauren?" Mark, a senior developer who had always been particularly uncomfortable with me, asked. His invitation sounded more like a challenge than a courtesy. Before I could respond, I heard a comment not meant for my ears, but loud enough for me to catch. "She probably got the position through some diversity quota." The comment hung in the air like a silent poison. My hands began to tremble slightly. One thing was to feel racism, quite another to hear it so explicitly. I wondered, how much more will I have to endure to prove that I deserve to be here? The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Mark, in his navy blue suit and a smile that dripped with veiled contempt, persisted in his invitation to dance. I knew it wasn't a gesture of cordiality, but a calculated provocation. "Come on, Lauren," he said, approaching me and leaving a trail of cologne that mixed expensive whiskey with corporate male sweat. "Don't you want to show that you know how to move in all environments?" His comment carried multiple layers of humiliation. It wasn't just an invitation to dance, it was a racial challenge, a test to see how the only black woman at the event would react. My years of experience in corporate environments had taught me to be strategic. I wouldn't fall into the trap of direct confrontation, but I also wouldn't let myself be intimidated. "Thanks, Mark," I responded with a calm that surprised even myself. "I prefer to observe for now." The background music, a mix of soft jazz and corporate electronica, seemed to create a sonic curtain for veiled looks and comments. I could feel the tension in the air, as if my presence challenged an established order. My mother, Diane, always told me, "Lauren, sometimes silence is the most powerful response," and at that moment, her voice resonated in my mind with absolute clarity. Suddenly, I saw Jennifer, the human resources manager, watching me. I knew she was aware of the racist comments, but her silence made her complicit in a system that perpetuated discrimination. My champagne glass was almost empty. Each sip was a small declaration of resistance. A group of executives passed near me, talking about a new $1 million project. Their laughter and comments reminded me of how much I had struggled to be there, how many obstacles I had overcome. Asterisk as I observed the ballroom full of executives. A burning question consumed my mind. When will I stop being seen as an intruder and be recognized for my true value? Asterisk the noise of the ballroom began to fade for me. My ears focused on the murmurs, on conversations that would normally go unnoticed. It was as if my intuition was more alert than ever. Near the bar, I overheard fragments of a conversation between two executives that captured my full attention. Michael Stevens, the deputy financial director, was speaking in a low voice with Robert Thompson, head of projects. Lawrence report is too good, Michael said, too precise to be just a coincidence. Robert responded with something I didn't completely catch, but his tone sounded worried. My internal alert system activated. What were they plotting? Why did my report make them so nervous? I remembered the long nights of work, the data I had meticulously analyzed, the algorithms I had developed to optimize the company's processes. Each line of code, each graph, each conclusion had been the result of months of rigorous research. Mark approached again, this time with a whiskey glass that seemed more like a threat than a drink. Impressive party, right? He said with a tone that dripped poison. I knew something more was hidden behind this apparent corporate normality. My intuition had never failed me. The background music changed. A soft jazz melody began to play, creating a strange contrast with the tension in the air. Jennifer, the human resources manager, was watching me from a distance. Her look was a mixture of curiosity and warning. Asterisk as I observed the movement of the ballroom, a certainty grew inside me. Tonight would not be just another party. Something big was about to happen, and I would be at the center of that storm. Asterisk the night advanced and the tension in the ballroom grew denser. That's when I saw him. A man around 50 years old, with an impeccable suit and a gaze that seemed to pierce through corporate walls, was watching me from across the room. He wasn't a common employee. His presence radiated a power that went beyond corporate titles. When our eyes met, I felt he was studying me, breaking me down as if I were a complex algorithm that needed to be deciphered. He approached with a calculated movement, like a chess player planning each step. Lauren Thompson, he said without asking. More as an affirmation than a greeting. Correct, I responded, maintaining my composure. I'm David Anderson, independent consultant. He introduced himself, extending a hand with a discreet but clearly expensive ring. His handshake was firm, but there was something more. It wasn't a casual greeting. Every movement seemed to have a hidden meaning. I saw your latest report on system optimization. He commented, it's interesting. The word interesting sounded more like a warning than a compliment. At that moment, I noticed Mark and Michael, standing near the bar, observing our conversation with a mix of nervousness and curiosity. David lowered his voice. There are things in this company that are not what they seem, Lauren. My heart began to beat faster. What was he implying? What secrets were hidden behind Tech Silicon's brilliant facade? A waiter passed nearby, offering champagne. David took a glass but didn't drink it. He simply held it like an extension of his hand, another object in his elaborate staging. Someone has been reviewing files they shouldn't, he whispered, almost brushing my ear. Asterisk the conversation with David Anderson had left more questions than answers. As he discreetly disappeared among the crowd, I felt that every movement in the ballroom had become more calculated, more tense. Jennifer, the human resources manager, was watching me from a distance. Her look was no longer one of simple curiosity, but of barely concealed concern. Mark continued near the bar, speaking in a low voice with Michael, both casting furtive glances at me. I decided to approach the bathroom, needing a moment to organize my thoughts. The side hallway of the event room allowed me to momentarily escape the corporate hustle. That's when I heard fragments of a conversation that froze my blood. Two executives were speaking in low voices, believing no one could hear them. The data Lauren discovered could sink us, said a male voice. We have to neutralize her before she presents the complete report, another voice responded. My mind began to work at a dizzying speed. What information in my investigations could be so dangerous? I remembered the last months of work, long nights, reviewing codes, analyzing data flows, detecting irregularities in the company's systems. Something didn't add up in the financial reports, but I hadn't been able to precisely identify what. I returned to the ballroom, feigning normality. My emerald green dress now seemed like armor, my elegance a shield against whatever was being plotted. Mark approached, this time with a champagne glass for me. Let's toast, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I stared at him directly. I knew something was hidden behind that apparent cordiality. Asterisk at that moment, I understood that the year-end party was much more than a simple corporate celebration. It was a battlefield where my career, my reputation, and even my safety were at stake. What secrets were they willing to hide? How far would they go to silence me? The tension in the ballroom could be cut with a knife. Every movement, every glance seemed loaded with hidden meanings. Mark was offering me the champagne glass with a smile that dripped poison. A toast, he said, to the team's achievements. Something inside me screamed not to accept that glass. My instinct, honed by years of navigating hostile corporate environments, was on maximum alert. Thanks, I responded. But I prefer water. My response seemed to throw Mark off. His eyes, previously calculating, showed a flash of frustration. At that moment, I saw David Anderson watching me from afar. His gaze was like a beacon in the darkness, a signal that something bigger was at play. A text message on my phone, unknown number, don't drink anything, they're plotting something. The sender could only be David. How did he know? What connection did he have to all this? The background music began to play softer. The executives moved like in a rehearsed dance, each playing a predetermined role. Michael Stevens, the deputy financial director, approached with a folder in hand. His face showed barely contained tension. Lauren, he said in a tone that allowed no argument. We need to talk privately. My mind was working at full speed. The conversation fragments I had heard before were making more and more sense. My investigations had discovered something I shouldn't have seen. The conference room adjacent to the ballroom seemed to be waiting for me like a trap ready to close. As I followed Michael, a question burned in my mind. How far were they willing to go to protect their secrets? Would this be the night when my career, my dignity, my truth would be completely exposed? The conference room was a cold space, designed for negotiations and decisions that change corporate destinies. The white walls, the windows reflecting the city of San Francisco, the glass and steel table, everything seemed like a stage prepared for my confrontation. Michael Stevens closed the door with a slow, calculated movement. His eyes, previously friendly in routine meetings, now exuded a hardness that reminded me of all the times my skin color had been seen as a threat. We need to talk about your latest report, he began, dropping a manila envelope on the table. I immediately recognized the documents. They were my investigations into financial system irregularities at Tech Silicon. Data that revealed a money laundering scheme implicating several high-level executives. You know too much, Michael said, his voice sounding more like a sentence. Then a conversation. At that moment, the door opened. David Anderson entered, with the same calm of someone who has been planning every move in advance. She's not alone, David said, positioning himself by my side. What followed was a revelation that would change everything. David wasn't just an independent consultant. He was a special investigator from a corporate integrity unit that had been tracking the Tech Silicon case for months. My investigations were not only correct, they were the final piece of a puzzle that would lead to the fall of a corruption network that had been operating for years. Michael began to sweat. His corporate masks were crumbling moment by moment. You don't understand, he stammered. This is bigger than us, but it was too late. My data, my investigations, my meticulous work had built an irrefutable case. As I looked at Michael, I understood that this night was not just about my professional survival. It was about breaking a system that had historically wanted to silence me. Would I be capable of taking this truth to its ultimate consequences? Was I prepared to face what was coming? The silence in the room was deafening. Michael Stevens had lost all his corporate power, now reduced to a frightened man watching decades of manipulation crumble. David Anderson pulled out an official document. Lauren Thompson, he said, you've been key in the investigation that will dismantle one of the largest corruption networks in the U.S. tech sector. The evidence was overwhelming. My months of silent investigation had unmasked a money laundering system involving not just Tech Silicon, but several tech companies and high-level politicians. They thought that, because I was a black woman, an immigrant from the south side of Chicago, I wouldn't be a threat. I thought to myself, my origin, which they had always used to belittle me, was now becoming my greatest strength. At that moment, my phone started ringing, dozens of messages from journalists, authorities, investigators. The news had already leaked. Mark, who moments before had looked at me with contempt, was now being handcuffed alongside other executives. The corporate party had transformed into a police operations scene. Jennifer, the human resources manager, was looking at me with a mix of fear and respect. Her complicit silence of years had finally been broken. How could a black woman from the periphery have dismantled all of this? I heard one of the police officers mumble. David approached me. Your mother would be proud, he said in a low voice. I remembered my mother's words. Lauren, your education is your most powerful weapon. As I watched the corporate empire that had humiliated me for so long. A burning question consumed my mind. Is this true justice? Or just the beginning of a deeper transformation? The following weeks were an emotional rollercoaster of revelations. My name was etched in headlines across all media. Lauren Thompson, the engineer who dismantled the corruption network at Tech Silicon. The calls wouldn't stop. Universities wanted me to give lectures. Civil rights organizations invited me to speak about representation. Media outlets sought my testimony. But I could only think of my mother, Diana, that woman who cleaned houses for decades, who taught me that dignity was non-negotiable, that knowledge was the only true inheritance she could leave me. One day, I took her to an elegant restaurant in downtown Chicago. For the first time, she could sit in a place where she had only worked as an employee before. Look, Mom, I said, everything you suffered, all your struggle was not in vain. Diana looked at me with her bright eyes, crossed by tears. My daughter, she whispered, you are the continuation of my story. The investigations continued. My work had uncovered a corruption network that implicated politicians, businessmen, and high-level officials. Every day, new evidence, new involved parties emerged. David Anderson became an important ally. He explained to me that my case was not just a personal triumph, but a significant blow to power structures that had historically excluded people like me. It wasn't luck, he would tell me, it was strategy, dedication, and an intelligence they never expected. Social media was exploding with my story. Young Black women from across the country were writing me messages of hope, of recognition. If you could do it, we can too, they would say. As I observed the city from my new apartment, obtained through my own merits, not as a corporate gift, I wondered, is this the true meaning of resistance? Transforming historical pain into a tool for change? The Chicago sun entered through the window of my new apartment, a space that represented much more than a personal achievement. It was the symbol of a victory that went beyond the individual. 3 months after the Tech Silicon scandal, my life had radically changed. The investigations I initiated had triggered a chain reaction that shook the foundations of the corporate world. One morning, while preparing my coffee, I received an unexpected call. The number was unknown, but something in my intuition told me this was no ordinary call. Lauren Thompson, said a male voice, serious and calculating. We need to talk. The man introduced himself as Robert Carter, a high-ranking government official with connections in the highest political spheres. His tone was a mixture of threat and warning. Your investigation has touched dangerous territories, he cautioned. But I was no longer the same Lauren who worked at Tech Silicon. Years of resistance, of fighting against a system that had systematically tried to silence me, had turned me into a relentless strategist. David Anderson, my ally in this battle, had taught me that information is the most powerful weapon. Every document, every email, every conversation had been meticulously archived. The meeting with Carter was organized in a discreet cafe in downtown Chicago. His eyes, accustomed to negotiating in the corridors of power, tried to intimidate me. There's information that could be dangerous if fully disclosed, he told me. His message was clear. There were secrets bigger than my initial investigation. Connections that could destabilize not just companies, but entire political structures. At that moment, my phone vibrated, a message from Maria, my younger sister. Be careful, someone has been following you. The network of contacts I had built was my greatest strength. Journalists, activists, human rights lawyers, all were on alert. Carter continued, we can come to an agreement, a significant economic compensation, a position in an international company. His offer was a traditional trap. They were trying to buy my silence, as they had tried to silence Black women before me. My response was sharp. I'm not for sale. As I watched Carter, I understood that this battle went far beyond me. It represented the struggle of generations of Black women who had been systematically marginalized, silenced, made invisible. Was I prepared to take this fight to its ultimate consequences? What darker secrets were about to be revealed? 1 year after that fateful corporate party, my life had completely changed. The legal compensations and recognitions allowed me to create the Diana Thompson Foundation, in honor of my mother, dedicated to supporting young Black professionals in technology. Every month, we selected 5 students from vulnerable areas for comprehensive scholarships and programming. This wasn't charity, it was justice. Each young person we trained was another crack in the system that had historically marginalized us. My testimony had provoked structural changes. New legislation against discrimination in the corporate environment began to be discussed. Tech companies knew they could no longer operate as before. At an international conference in Chicago, I shared my story. Thousands of people, mainly young Black individuals and those from marginalized communities, listened to me. I didn't come here to be an example of overcoming, I said firmly. I came to demonstrate that talent has no color, that intelligence knows no social boundaries. My sister Maria, now a law student, looked at me from the front row with pride. We were living proof that education transforms generations. David Anderson, who had become more than an ally, almost a mentor, had taught me that each investigation, each line of code, could be a tool for social transformation. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. International job offers, invitations to speak about innovation and equity. But I knew my true work was in my foundation, in each young person we were training. Reflecting on the entire journey, I understood that my story was not just mine. It was the story of my mother cleaning houses, of my father working at the port, of generations who resisted so that I could be here. Looking out the window of my office, with a view of Chicago, a certainty struck me. I didn't come to be an individual success story. I came to be part of a collective transformation movement. My name is Lauren Thompson. I am Black. I am from the periphery. I am a technologist. And this is just the first page of our resistance story.